Now, to discuss further on the suspension of the Labour Union strike, we have in the studio Jide Johnson, a public affairs commentator. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Pleasure to be with you, and good day to our viewers all over the world. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. All right, so we'd love to hear your thoughts on, the strike generally and what you feel about the suspension for 1 week.
Well, I think that in recent time, there has never been any strike that has had this type of impact that it had on the socio-political, economic life of Nigerians, because everything was at a standstill. For most Nigerians, they didn't have access to power. Those that want to travel didn't have the opportunity of traveling because the aviation sector also joined in this particular strike. And a strong signal was sent by Labour, which we have never had from Labour for a very, very long time. And you could see the prompt response of the government in trying to address that particular problem. You saw that initially the Minister of Information and the Special Advisor to the President gave a press conference, and then before you know it, a meeting was called for later in the evening. So it tells you that that the strike had its impact on the government, and government responded quickly by inviting them for a meeting, which has led to the breaking news which we had as we got into the studio with the suspension, or looking at nomenclature, the labor leaders, whether it's suspension, whether it's release, but at least the strike is not called off. It has been relaxed.
A lot of people would actually beg to differ. You said the strike actually, sent a strong signal to the leaders. The common man seem to have suffered more, because when it comes to, light, most of the common man, or those who are, that's the civil servants themselves, barely have access to light in the first place, and also generators. And then not forgetting that the oil marketers also, went on strike, so it was difficult for them to even get fuel to buy for their generators. Meanwhile, when it comes to the leaders, they actually have access to, all these things readily. So would you say it really affected or it made an impact on our leaders or the common man more?
It made more impact on the leaders, because it's not good for their optics. It's not good for their image. You can't be a leader if you're a leader of, let's say you are the MD of a company, and then your workers stage a walkout. It has left an indelible mark. When they are writing the history of this administration, it's on record that the strike was called at a particular point in time. So whether you like it or not, no pain, no gain. There are sacrifices that has to be made on the part of the citizenry and on the part of the mass for them to get whatever deliverables they want to get from the government. And I'm sure, why did you think that government responded quickly? Why did you think that government keeps issuing statement and statement? Every time Labour comes out with one statement, government responded quickly. You recall when Labour said where they had in the meeting is under siege, and quickly the Ministry of Defence quickly issued and explained. When was the last time you had agencies of government responding promptly to issues of Labour? So there's no doubt that the mass will feel it more. But the reality of the matter is that there's a particular saying in my local dialect, when a rooster lands on a line where we put cloth, it is not easy for the rooster, it's not easy for the line. So it's not easy for both parties, but it's the sacrifices that must be made for us to get a living wage for an average worker. Because if you break it down, there's no doubt, like the chairman of the aviation in Lagos said, when it comes to passing laws or making bills, for example, look at the speed of light with which the National Anthem Bill was passed. Yeah. Look at the speed of light with which appropriation was made for the purchases of cars and whatever.
Revamping of houses.
Revamping of houses, renovation of the offices of the National Assembly members and members of the Federal Executive Council. And look at how government has been foot dragging with respect to what they should pay since January.
Yes, that's actually my next question. Why do you think the government is still stalling as regards the amount to be paid workers? Because, what we heard from them is that they would pay more than 60,000 naira, but they've still not come to a conclusion as to the exact amount that they're willing to pay civil servants. And in your opinion, what amount is okay as a living wage for workers?
For me, I think it's between 120 and 150,000. That's been my view, within 150 and 20,000. National population policy on a family is a family of 6, 4 children. The 1988 policy, 4 children and the parents, that's 6. Now, if you divide 120 by 6 across 30 months, what does it amount to? And then if you factor in how many liters of fuel are you going to buy in 120,000? So basically, when Labour is saying that 60,000 is not sufficient, if you have a family of 6 in 60,000, 60,000 divided by 30 days will give you what? 2,000 per day. Now, can an average person spend 2,000 per day? Now, not to talk of a family of 6, taking out transportation and other utility bills and the rest of it. So for us, for government to actually be showing the intention that actually they want to pay the workers a living wage, then considering the purchasing power of Naira, I think 120, between 120 to 150,000 would be the most appropriate minimum wage.
All right, that was Jide Johnson. Now we also have joining us via Zoom, Ire Oluwa Oguntuashe. He's the labor law expert. Thank you so much for joining us at this time. Ire Oluwa, can you hear me? It's a pleasure. All right, so go ahead.
I can hear you.
All right, go ahead and speak to us on the suspension of the strike and why you think the government is actually foot dragging, on the amounts to pay workers.
I think this is a big subject matter of negotiation. And again, we need to consider the fact that the issue of minimum wage is a 5-year tenure. And when I say 5-year tenure, by the provision of the Minimum Wage Act, so what I mean is that once we have, once government and labor, once they've agreed to a particular minimum wage now, it's going to take another 5 years, for there to be a review of the minimum wage. And the increase in salary within this period of time will mostly be a subject matter of discretion. So I think going by the length of time, that's one of the reasons, it may have taken long to have this particular agreement. And I think another reason we need to also consider is that apart from the federal government, several other important interests are also involved. I'm talking of the interest of the organized private sector and also interest of the state government. So these are the things the federal government are also looking at, in agreeing on the minimum wage. But again, if we look at the amount to be agreed on specifically, we can say that the 60,000 that the federal government has proposed is totally unacceptable. I would definitely agree with that. And as such, I'm really happy with the agreement that federal government entered with Labour with respect to the fact that, there is nothing called 60,000 again. Any amount that will be agreed on will be more than the 60,000, that was previously agreed on. So I think it's the right step in the right direction. Conversations and negotiations are still ongoing, and I hope parties will be able to come to an amicable resolution. All right,
before I go ahead and ask you the question. Now, there's been no definite amount yet, and they said over 60,000 naira, and a colleague of mine earlier said over 60,000 naira could mean 61,000 naira. Now we have our guest here, Jide, who actually said that he believes 120 to 150,000 naira would be, a fair amount to pay workers. But so many people, especially the federal government, seem to believe that, an increase that high would cripple the economy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought on that is that I wouldn't want to subscribe to the fact that an increase that high, will cripple the economy. And why am I saying this? There has been increase in the wages of some particular sections of people. The national and the parliamentarians or the national legislature, they bought Prado jeeps for themselves, and they had also had their salaries increased. So the question will now be, shouldn't the general employees that are really feeling the brunt, should their salary not be increased, particularly given the fact that the provisions of the Minimum Wage Act as a president, has given room for the increase in the minimum wage on one hand. On the other hand, if you look at the rate of inflation, if you look at food inflation, if you look at the rate to assess health, if you look at some other things that are involved, electricity tariff hike, I think it is very necessary and expedient for the minimum wage to be increased. So people that are saying that 120,000, 150,000 will cripple the economy, for me, I don't really subscribe to that. And the reason I don't really subscribe to it is that if we look at the amount, the basic amenities that every human being should buy or would need, food, clothing, housing, health. If you look at those things and we now place it within the context of the proposed 120 and 150, I will now place it within the context of that, even within that 120 and 150,000 minimum wage, there are some dependent population that would also spend out of it. So can we now say that that minimum wage will be enough? For me, I don't think so. So I think it's still a subject matter of negotiation. It's a calculation that needs to be done very well. People saying that the lowest cadre collecting 120 will cripple the economy. They should also understand that the lowest cadre of workers are also citizens of Nigeria. The lowest cadre of workers are also feeling the economic crunch. And hence, the lowest cadre of workers in Nigeria are also affected, by the negative economy. Hence, their salary needs to be increased. But the subject matter, the increase, is a real subject matter of negotiation. I will subscribe for now to over 120,000. But another thing I would like to say is that the timeline for the review of the minimum wage by the minimum wage that also appears too long, 5 years. If you look at the last time that the minimum wage has been increased, 2019, how much was the price of bag of rice then? How much can you assess health then? We'll see that is actually extremely low if you consider the percentage difference to what we have now. So for we to have another 5 years, for us to have another increase or another review of minimum wage, will it really be appropriate given the volatility of the Nigerian economy and the speculated inflationary rate that can happen within that period of time? I think these are the things that should also be put into consideration. All
right, let's come back to you, Jide. Now, majority of Nigerians are actually happy about, how things have actually played out during the strike up until now. Now, would you say that even after 1 week, if the federal government and the labor unions fail to come to a conclusion about the amount that, this industrial action would have been justified somehow?
Well, I'm sure that they will come to an agreement because one, there is the wave of public opinion is on the side of labor. In the past, it used to be on the side of the government. That's why you see that strike that has been called, except this last one, in the last 1 year, has not been successful. It has to be call of dime in it, and government felt the wave of public opinion was on their side. It's the battle of public opinion now, and the opinion seems to be on the side of labor. So I think that government, in its wisdom and in its sincerity, will agree. We have an agreement with labor in order to resolve this particular matter. Like Riolua said, when it was time to increase the wages of judicial workers, of the judges, did we go through this? In the last 1 year, the wages of Supreme Court justices, High Court judges, people work have been increased without much ado about nothing. Why should it be that of the workers and what the workers are asking? And I like one illustration which he gave. What was the value of a bag of rice in 2019 when the last increment was done compared to what it is now? If hiking electricity tariff, if removing petroleum subsidy, if removing educational subsidy did not cripple the economy, why is it that what you are going to give the worker is going to cripple them? So, all
right. So just before we move to Irolua, now can you share your thoughts on what the Attorney General of the Federation said about the strike, deeming it as immature and illegal?
Well, the Attorney General is speaking as Minister of Justice, not as Attorney General, because he's an appointee of the President. He reports to the President, and he has to justify the reason why he's appointed into office. You'll recall, like Irolua said, he's saying it's illegal. Thank God we had a lawyer who has given a legal perspective to it. Now, the law says that every 5 years. So if you talk 2019 to date, that it ought to have been reviewed. And so it's within even the purview of the law. Probably he did not study the law, and he got a brief from one of his lawyers that didn't probably study the law to give him that particular brief, because there's nothing illegal. It's within the fundamental rights of every worker to ask and make a demand for what should be their rights, what should be their living wages. And if he's talking about, I think I heard him talking about the time limit, the provisions of them, giving them notices when it's about to come to. You should not forget that this issue of this minimum wage did not start with this particular administration. It started with Buhari administration. And in government does not exist in vacuum. If you take over from the previous government, it is still the same government. It's a continuum. So basically, there's no illegality concerning that. Labor has been negotiating over this particular matter, and a committee was set up in January. So if Labour is going to strike now, it's nothing illegal. It's what he has said that is illegal.
All right, let's go back to Iriolua. Now let's have your thoughts on the same question. You know, the Attorney General of the Federation is saying that the industrial action is immature and illegal.
Okay, we need to understand the basis upon which the Attorney General of the Federation is coming from. Coincidentally, the Attorney General of the Federation is a learned senior, someone I respect so much. So I will just speak based on my own opinion, and given the fact that everybody is also entitled to use their own opinion. Now, the base upon which Attorney General of the Federation made that statement is on the premise of Section 41 and 42 of the Trade Dispute Act that says that if an employee that is within the essential services wants to go on strike, they must give 15 days notice. Now, the question is that all the categories of employees that have gone on strike based on the fact that the NLC, has requested the affiliate unions to go on strike. The question is, are they categorized as essential services under the Trade Dispute Act? That question is answered in the first schedule of the Trade Dispute Act that states that essential services, workers in the essential services can be workers within the health sector, workers within the electricity sector, workers within the dock or shipping sector, and other categories of worker. Now, I want to say something. For all the people that have gone on strike, they extend beyond the categories of essential services that is stated within the Trade Dispute Act. Hence, the necessity to give the 15 days notice as applicable to workers within the essential services may not be applicable here, because all the categories of employees that have gone on strike transcends beyond workers within the essential services. All workers, that's number one. Number two, the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister for Justice also made allusion to a particular injunction that was obtained in 2023. Right. To the best of my knowledge, this issue actually happens in 2024, and I don't think that an injunction has been obtained or granted by the courts, National Industrial Court, stipulating or restraining the Nigerian Labour Congress from going on strike. If I may complete my thought. Now, another thing is the Attorney General of the Federation.
Please, can you do that quickly? Yeah.
Yes, the Attorney General of the Federation unilaterally declaring the strike illegal. It is only the courts, in line with Section 6 and Section 287, that have, of the 1999 Constitution as amended, that have the right to do something like this. So I think the position of the Attorney General is a subject matter of his opinion, and I don't think that he holds sway, in this case, except it is coming from a court of competent jurisdiction.
All right, well, thank you so much, Iriolua and Jide, for joining us on the news today and speaking to us on this. We appreciate you for your time.
Thank you for having us.